So I think I finally figured it out why the X100V and other Fujifilm cameras became so popular in 2022. As for the last 2 weeks, I've been testing out these point and shoot types cameras from Fujifilm, and I'm going to tell you guys the same conclusion that I told my friend recently. I currently own a bunch of expensive and heavy photography gear, and when I go out with friends or even when I'm traveling, most of that gear usually just stays in my camera bag. I really don't like using iPhones as they feel and look too digital, and they're just not unique in any way. So having a almost pocketable camera that achieves a more natural shallow depth of field and also has very good image quality coming straight out of camera with the film simulation JPEGs. But most importantly, these cameras make photography fun again, and they really inspire me to document my life. So that's where these cameras fit into my personal and potentially also my professional photography. So today we're gonna break down all of the Fuji cameras. Should you guys get the X100V and all the hype around it? What about the F version? And also what about the XE4? And also why in 2023 you should avoid all of these cameras. Firstly, let's break down some myths. Digital will never replace film. Not yet. In my last video, I shot the XE4 side by side with Portra 400 film. I used a film recipe from Fujifilm Weekly that's meant to imitate the Portra 400 look. And I'm actually pretty impressed. The results are very similar to each other. There is a little bit of a white balance difference, but that's easy to fix in post. You need to remember that film also has much more dynamic range. It has much better highlight roll-off compared to the APS-C size sensors on the Fujifilm cameras. Also, Fujifilm do not imprint a halation into their photos like you do get with film. But the organic feel and the colors are very similar to each other, and from a first glance, when they're side by side, you can't really notice a difference between the two. So if you're wanting to pick up one of these Fujifilm cameras, there is something you need to learn first. The X100V has the same sensor in the XE4, and the X Pro 3, and also the X-T4. So all four of those cameras, you're gonna get the same exact image quality. You also get the same autofocus, and you also get the exact same film simulations. But the difference comes down to the user experience. So the X series is a fixed focal length, so you cannot remove the lens. It's a 35mm full frame equivalent. Even if you want to remove the lens, you can't, because it actually has a very unique shutter design where the shutter is actually integrated inside the lens. So even if you want to change the lenses, you can't remove it at all. But basically the only thing that separates the X100V from the other Fuji cameras is that it has an inbuilt flash, and it just looks aesthetically cool. In my personal opinion, the XE4 is definitely the best camera to buy, as it's basically the same as the X100V without the flash, but you can put different lenses on that camera. And when you pair the XE4 with the 27mm f2.8 pancake lens, you can actually have a much more compact system than the X100V. And if you really want to use the rangefinder styled viewfinder, then the X Pro 3 has that option too. So I've actually been testing out the X100F. It is the older version of the V. The V is actually 3 years old now. It's getting on there and it's due for a replacement. This version of the X100F that I have is actually a little bit old, and it's showing its age because it's stuck in ISO 100, which I've actually been enjoying because it's like shooting on film. When I shoot on my film camera, I have to set the ISO, and the only things that I can change is the aperture and the shutter speed for my exposure. Now, the problem that I personally have, and you can actually avoid this pretty easy, is these top dials on the Fujifilm cameras. I think aesthetically they look cool, they are nice to play around with and turn. But the one complaint, especially with the shutter function, is that say if you want to go from 1 to 50 of a second, your next stop is 1/500. that's a full stop. So you never get the quarter stops in between, while when I'm using my Sony a7 IV or any other photography camera, it goes up in quarter stops or third stops. That's my only really gripe about these Fujifilm cameras. I think also they don't have much of a grip. This X100F actually has a little bit of a grip. The XE4 has no grip, but you can actually pimp these cameras out with a bunch of different accessories, which is pretty cool. Like this thumb grip that I've got right here, that makes a huge difference when you're just holding the camera. So why are these cameras actually a little bit dead to me and kind of outdated in my opinion? So me personally, I am looking to buy a Fujifilm point and shoot styled camera, and I just love shooting on the XE4. But I just feel like if it had a few more video specs so I could do things for this YouTube channel and also vlog, like having IBIS and having 4K 30 with 10-bit 422 F-Log would make a huge difference personally for myself. Now I know these are not photography terms. If you have no need for any of these video specs, I think any of these cameras would be a great option for you. Even this X100F, it still takes amazing photos. The image quality is right up there. It lacks a little bit on the autofocus, and like I said before, being a 5-year-old camera is now stuck in ISO 100. They are amazing cameras, and man, they just make photography fun again. They're also really great for nailing your exposure because you don't have much flexibility with a JPEG image. You do have to get the exposure correct the first go. So in the last 2 weeks, it's really excelled my photography and it's made me a better photographer. So I actually have reviewed a bunch of Fujifilm cameras on this channel. In the description down below, I have linked a playlist that you guys can go check out, or if you want to see more behind the scenes of that portrait shoot with the XE4, you guys can watch that right here. If you like this content, make sure you hit that like button to let me know. If you want to see more photo and video content like this, make sure you guys subscribe, and we'll see you next week.